Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the FSA's Food for Thought seminar series. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rachel Pointer, and I'm part of the Food for Thought team here at the FSA, also joined today by Christina from the team. Before I introduce you to today's speakers, I'd just like to remind you of a couple of points. As this is a Microsoft Webinars event, you won't be able to unmute yourself or turn on your camera, and the chat function is also disabled. We do, however, welcome any questions or comments that you might have, which can be posted in the Q&A box, which you'll find using the Q&A button at the top of your screen. Any questions submitted will be picked up at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to add your questions as we go along, and we'll come to them later. So today's seminar is being recorded. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel and circulated after the event. And we're always looking for recommendations for new speakers to invite to Food for Thought or topics to cover. So if you've got any suggestions for us, then please do get in touch at our email. The address is foodforthought@food.gov.uk. Or you can get in touch via the feedback form that we'll be sharing at the end of the seminar. So for today's presentation, I'd like to provide a very warm welcome to our speakers from the FSA. We have Isobel Feber, who's Senior Sampling Officer, and Sophie Bell, Sampling Officer from the Laboratories and Sampling team. Alice Rawlings, Intelligence Analyst in the Local Authority Intelligence Coordination team. Jim Clements, Imports Delivery Area Officer from the Import Delivery team. Jennifer Donaghue, Head of Analysis and Features at the National Food Crime Unit at the FSA. And we've got Amy Walker, Senior Sampling and Surveillance Manager in the Wales Consumer Protection team. So they've all kindly joined us today to give us a bit of an overview of the food sampling that is funded by the FSA. The presentation will cover why food sampling is an important part of our work, the breadth of sampling undertaken, and how sampling results are used to improve compliance with food law. So without further ado, from all of us at the Food for Thought team, we hope you enjoy the seminar, and I'll hand over to Isobel to start our journey into FSA food sampling.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for that warm welcome. I'm going to give you an overview of FSA sampling before handing over to my colleagues to talk to you about their sampling work streams. So why do we do sampling? Sampling supports the FSA's goal to ensure that the UK has food you can trust. That's to say, to make sure that food is safe and is what it says it is. Sampling helps the FSA to identify or verify potential safety, standards, and authenticity risks. We can then work with others to address these risks, such as local authorities and the food industry. Local authorities are responsible for the enforcement of food standards and safety within their area and carry out their own sampling. The FSA, however, has some of its own regulatory obligations for which sampling provides vital support. In addition to this, one of the guiding principles of the FSA is that we're science and evidence-led in our approach. The data and evidence from sampling supports this way of working to delivering our goals. Ultimately, the results from sampling funded by the FSA provide us with essential information to protect consumers and enables action to be taken where there are risks to food safety or standards. So, the FSA funds a significant quantity of sampling and the subsequent analysis of samples. For example, in the financial year 2023 to 24, we spent approximately 3.3 million on sampling. That equates to, in the region, of 14,000 samples being procured and analysed. However, samples may be tested for more than one aspect, so the number of tests would actually be much higher. In the terms of the type of sampling the FSA funds, this can be broken down into 4 different categories with different purposes, and I'm just going to go through those for you. So, targeted surveillance. This is an intelligence-led sampling which provides a snapshot of data which can be used to assist the FSA in validating risks when considered alongside other intelligence. Surveillance sampling programs are specifically targeted at areas of potential risk or vulnerability, so they carry a greater likelihood of identifying non-compliance than we would expect to see if we were to take a random sample. Official control sampling. This is targeted sampling that the FSA funds local authorities to undertake to improve business compliance. Some of this funding supports follow-up activity on adverse results from targeted surveillance. We also carry out sampling for regulatory monitoring purposes. The FSA funds this sampling to fulfil its food and feed safety monitoring responsibilities. For example, regulatory monitoring of shellfish and associated waters. We also conduct sampling to inform our own scientific knowledge and for our own research. We carry out sampling which provides statistically robust data on specific hazards relating to specific areas of the food chain or commodities. This increases the FSA's knowledge, contributes to the work of our scientific committees, and informs our risk assessments and policy development. However, we don't have time to tell you about all the different types of sampling that the FSA does today, unfortunately. We'd be here for a very long time. So we're going to focus on two specific areas, and those are the targeted surveillance and the official control sampling. For the FSA's targeted surveillance sampling and official control sampling, the decisions on what food products and hazards to test comes from evaluating a wide range of intelligence from a wide range of sources. This can include information from our official control laboratories who test samples for local authorities, from local authorities themselves, from food industry via stakeholder groups that the FSA either runs or attends, from internal FSA colleagues who are experts in their fields, and from other government departments, and via international alert systems for food safety issues. We have an annual process in place to collate suggestions for sampling, review these, and prioritise them, and then determine the most appropriate work stream for them to be taken forward under. However, we still need to remain flexible to considering emerging intelligence on risks during the year that may need to need for sampling. As mentioned, coordination is key in the FSA to ensure we conduct sampling under the most appropriate programmes to achieve the best outcome. For example, targeted surveillance sampling can be used to verify risks based on intelligence, and this can be quite a wide range of intelligence. We can use this to narrow down the area of risk or the products of greatest concern. The results can then inform the sampling that we fund local authorities to undertake. This ensures that local authority resources are used wisely. The colleagues that are presenting today meet on a regular basis to plan sampling and review results. In addition to this internal coordination, we ensure cross-government sampling coordination on food via regular cross-government meetings and engagement. Now that I've set the broader context on FSA sampling, I am very pleased to hand over to my colleagues who are going to give you a brief overview of the areas of FSA sampling for which they're responsible. Our first presenter is Sophie Bell, who is going to tell you about the FSA's Retail Surveillance Survey. I'll hand over to Sophie. Thank you.
Thanks, Isobel, and good afternoon, everybody. So as Isobel mentioned, today I'm going to give an overview of the Retail Surveillance Survey, which I oversee with Isobel, explain how we handle results and how the findings are used by the agency. So now in its 6th year, the Retail Surveillance Survey was first launched in 2020 during the pandemic. At that time, sampling had reduced due to local authorities needing to concentrate their resources on the response to the pandemic. This raised concern on the reduction in monitoring of food safety and authenticity risks overall, and therefore this programme was initially created to help fill that gap. The programme has since continued each year, and the FSA commissions this survey through its Science, Evidence and Research Directorate. It's then delivered by the laboratories, known as Public Analyst Official Laboratories, or PALLs, and 5 of which are based in England and Wales. Now, these labs test food and animal feed for local authorities to protect public health, ensure consumer safety, and support local authorities in enforcing food law. So each year, the types of food products within the survey vary, and we choose what we sample along with what they will be tested for via the coordinated prioritisation process, which Isobel has just described. Within the survey, we mainly focus on checking for undeclared allergens, verifying the authenticity of the food. For example, is the meat within the product what it claims to be? Analysing the composition, so checking if there is as much meat in a product as the label claims, and we also assess contaminants such as heavy metals. Most of the samples will also have their labels checked to ensure they meet any labelling requirements. The samples in the survey are collected from across England, Wales and Northern Ireland by the public analysts. They're bought both in store and online, and as the survey is a targeted survey, we focus on higher risk areas. Therefore, more samples are purchased from smaller retailers than larger ones, as we have previously found more unsatisfactory results within these areas. It's also important to keep in mind that as the survey is targeted in nature, that the results are not representative of the food market overall. Whilst the sampling is being undertaken, to make sure we get a good geographic spread of samples, each lab receives a shopping list of sorts and its designated areas to sample from. This helps avoid duplication and ensures we get the best value for money. There is also a limit to the number of samples, similar samples that can be taken from any one local authority area, and this helps avoid putting too much pressure on them if follow-up action is needed. Now, I've mentioned the survey has continued each year, and this is due to its success, and it enables the FSA to conduct target sampling based on intelligence to uncover or verify potential risks within the food supply chain. And it also helps us gather data for policy decisions or risk assessments. For example, an allowable limit for a certain component in a food may not be defined, and this data can help determine this. It not only informs the science at the FSA, but the survey also helps provide support to local authorities, as we share the survey findings with them to help support the direction of their enforcement sampling. And it also supports the public analyst official laboratories, ensuring sample throughput and funding, as the number of these labs has declined over the years. Next slide, please, Isobel. So if I told you that last year's survey alone included over 800 samples, you might wonder what happens to all of the results. So during the survey, the public analysts carry out the tests and assess whether each sample, in their opinion, is satisfactory or unsatisfactory according to any relevant food law or industry guidance. If a sample is found to be unsatisfactory, a formal report called a certificate of analysis is sent to myself and Isobel. We then work with our colleagues in food standards and the sampling teams in Wales and Northern Ireland, who share the results with the relevant local authorities in England and Wales and the district councils in Northern Ireland. We make sure to notify both the authority area where the product was bought from and then any local authority area involved in the food's production or distribution. The trading standard officers can then review the results and determine what appropriate follow-up action may be required. Now, sometimes we can get results which present a health risk and or have the potential to be a widespread issue, for example. And in these cases, the result may be passed to the FSA instance teams to manage straight away. When we do share results to the local authorities, we ask them to let us know what actions they've taken, if any, and this feedback helps us understand the impact of the survey. Throughout the survey, we also monitor for any emerging patterns or trends in the results, and dependent on the nature of any trends we might see, we may then also consider proactive communications, such as alerting industry groups. All of these actions can help ensure that products on the market are safe and comply with food law. So moving on to after the survey, once we have all the results in, the work doesn't stop there. As I mentioned, we share a summary of the results with local authorities with the aim that this will help them plan their future sampling activities. We also then publish a full report, which is available to the public on the FSA's Research and Evidence platform, and we will share the link for last year's report as part of this seminar. While we keep an eye on trends during the survey, we then carry out a deeper analysis once all the results are in. And these findings help guide future work in several ways. So they feed back into that coordinated prioritisation process that determine future FSA-funded sampling activities. For example, if a risk is identified, the FSA may fund targeted local authority sampling through the Local Authority Intelligence Coordination Team. And this team can also use the results to help shape the national food standards priorities. And both of these are areas which Alice will talk more about shortly. Another example of how our survey supports other FSA teams is in the area of food authenticity. For instance, findings from meat product testing have previously informed the National Food Crime Unit's strategic assessments and control strategies. Finally, the survey results can lead to updates in FSA guidance. An example of this is shown to the right of your screens. So last year, we tested caffeine supplements to check if the actual caffeine content matched to what was claimed on the label, and if the label met requirements as outlined in regulations. A high number of samples were found to be unsatisfactory, however, the majority were due to minor labelling issues. These results, however, did prompt a review by the FSA's caffeine subgroup, which includes representatives from other government departments, such as Food Standards Scotland and the Department of Health and Social Care. The group considered the findings and published updated business guidance in June this year, alongside when the full retail surveillance survey report was published. The business guidance includes advice additionally from the NHS and FSA on safe caffeine levels and provides information on labelling and compositional compliance. The caffeine supplement findings also supported work on the National Food Standards Priorities, one of which is food supplements, and we work closely with Alice's team to share these insights. With that, I'll now hand over to Alice, who will explain her work on local authority directed sampling.
Thank you, Sophie. Hello, I'm Alice Rawlings. I'm an intelligence analyst in the FSA Regulatory Compliance Division. I'm also the lead for the FSA Food Standards Directed Sampling Programme. This programme is delivered by the Local Authority Intelligence Coordination Team in collaboration with local authorities in England. However, I would state we do also work with Welsh local authorities and Northern Irish district councils by exception. The Food Standards Directed Sampling Programme was introduced as part of the recommendations for modernisation of food standards official controls. This was to complement the new food standards delivery model. The programme was first piloted in 2021 and is now delivered on an annual basis through LAICT, the Local Authority Intelligence Coordination Team. This is in recognition of how an intelligence-led approach can enhance the outcomes of sampling and also the key role of sampling in feeding the food standards intelligence cycle. The programme has now completed 3 cycles and we are working through our 4th year of delivery with our local authority partners. The programme relies on collaborative work with local authority officers to achieve our aims. By targeting resources to areas of concern, we can then capitalise upon officers' powers to exact change to bring those products and businesses into compliance. Moving on to the delivery aspect of it, how do we actually do that? The commodities and hazards we explore are identified through the cross-FSA sampling prioritisation process, which Isobel has already outlined. However, since the launch of the National Food Standards Priorities, the issues explored by directed sampling largely align with these priorities. The NFSPs are drafted by the Local Authority Intelligence Coordination Team to support operational delivery of food standards official controls. These priorities are based on analysis of intelligence from consumer, local authority and FSA sources. Once commodities and hazards have been agreed, the team will recruit local authorities to participate. Where issues are identified as being wide-ranging and relevant to multiple local authorities, such as issues around allergen information in prepared meals at takeaways or unauthorised additives in imported soft drinks, we have invited local authorities to bid for funding. This has been well received with applications and participation growing year on year. In other years, we have made intelligence-based assessments and approached local authorities assessed as well placed to explore a risk or to exact change. For example, this is when we've offered funding to the home authority of a business where an adverse product result has been found in the retail surveillance survey. Participating local authorities then share their results with the team, which we collate and analyse to draw further understanding and inform our next steps. This brings us on nicely to some of our outcomes, how we're using our results. If we could move to the next slide, please, Isobel. Thank you. Directed sampling outcomes and successes have been many. Beyond the relationship building with local authorities, which has facilitated creative problem solving, there have been tactical outcomes delivered at a local level by officers and strategic cross-FSA interventions driven by analysis of the sampling results. The first three results detailed here on the slide are tactical successes delivered by officers off the back of adverse sampling results. In line with the National Food Standards priority, allergen information at caterers, we invited local authorities to bid for funding to address risks in their local area. One local authority chose to investigate risks in hot drinks. The unsatisfactory results at one major retailer sparked discussions between the local authority, which then, acting as primary authority, was able to discuss the non-compliance with the national chain's HACCP management team to introduce changes to protect consumers. In the second example, also in line with National Food Standards priorities, a regional group of local authorities approached the Local Authority Intelligence Coordination Team with a proposal to investigate food supplements containing one specific ingredient. 4 local authorities participated. One local authority spent such significant time providing business advice relating to a labelling non-compliance that the business recognised the value of the local authority business advice and has entered a primary authority relationship. Another of the participating local authorities notified a large multinational food business of the compositional issues identified, which then led to the business to withdraw 2 non-compliant products from the UK market. The results from this small sampling project within the directed sampling programme will also be shared with the 4 Nations Supplement Working Group to inform strategic work around this ingredient. Our third example is from where we have funded local authorities to conduct official control follow-up samples on adverse results identified in the retail surveillance survey. Official control samples may permit the local authority to take more robust action against a business where necessary. In the 24-25 retail surveillance survey, there was identified non-compliances in bubble tea products, and the directed sampling programme provided local authorities with funding to follow up. From one adverse result, an official control sample allowed a local authority to work with the business, leading to a reformulation of the product to ensure that it complied with the relevant food law. However, above and beyond the tactical outcomes for an individual product or an individual business, directed sampling may also inform more strategic outcomes, such as the second 2 or the remaining examples. In one of the very first waves of the directed sampling programme, we looked at the presence of allergens of animal origin in products labelled as vegan. This was due to the expanding market on vegan products, together with intelligence suggesting hypersensitive customers were choosing vegan products, assuming they would be free from animal-derived allergens. However, the levels of non-compliance identified in the sampling informed the evidence base to commission further social science work within the agency. This ultimately informed consumer guidance published in 2024, which advised that vegan did not equate to free from. The linked campaign reached over 1 million people and had 1.3 million impressions, making it the most successful FSA campaign on allergens to date at that time, August 2024. Our final example is following identified mineral oil, which is a non-permitted additive, which is also assessed as a safety concern, in imported US hard candies, the FSA worked with a US-based brand owner. We established that any hard candies for sale in the UK market had not been imported through the brand owner's approved agents. To protect consumers with the knowledge of the brand owner, a food alert for action was issued to local authorities to remove any of these products seen for sale in their area. Further work is ongoing in this area, including a cross-agency lessons learned exercise, and we've recently published consultation on further local authority enforcement guidance in the grey markets area. So, on that note, regards imported candy, I'll hand over to Jim to talk about the imported food sampling programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Nice segue into imported food there. So my name is Jim Clements. I'm the area delivery officer for the imports delivery team, and along with my colleagues, we oversee the imported food sampling programs. This is issued out to the local authorities as well as the port health authorities, and we also have a contract with Feber at the moment, who are also currently doing a imported food sampling program with us. So the reason why we have this imported food sampling program is, first of all, is to identify emerging risks from imported foods. We also, through this, we then gather evidence on these high-risk products, and these may then go on to the EU retained Regulation 2019/1793. Since leaving the EU, the FSA are responsible for making these amendments to this high-risk list. We also like to have a good cross-section of products as well as contaminants. This also then maintains the sampling knowledge among local authority officers and for those that are newly qualified. This programme also raises and maintains awareness of imported food regulations within the high street, as well as assisting in traceability exercises for potentially illegally imported food products. Next slide, please, Isobel. So every year we tend to offer out funding for between 1,500 and 2,000 samples. As I said, these are currently underway with over 40 different local authorities and port health authorities have taken part. Some of the actions that we've had from previous sampling programs is that where we've had a high level of high levels of contamination, during the traceability from the local authorities, where they've then either done product recalls or they've sought the traceability, they found these products to be illegally imported, and this then also brings about the relationship between illegally imported food and sampling. They do go quite close together. Where we assess these contaminations of imported food products, new import controls are then placed as if and when necessary. When we do see a large sampling failure rate on certain commodities from certain countries, these then undergo a risk assessment between our various teams within the FSA, and then this information is then discussed within the imports policy team, and then future amendments on Regulation 2019/1793 are then proposed. As well as that, we do also gather intel on movements of emerging risks. So again, this kind of intel then relates to the border control posts. So the port health authorities can then increase their manifest checks and monitoring on these emerging risks of imported food. All this information is also available on the Risk Likely dashboard, which is available to all local authorities. Also, through these failures and through the actions taken by the local authorities, and then going back to these food businesses from where these samples are taken, they can then remind them of their responsibility on ensuring that they sell food that is safe to eat, and it also reinforces the need to export from approved premises from outside of Great Britain. I'd now like to pass this on to Jen, please, of the National Food Crime Unit.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jen Donaghue, and I'm talking to you from the National Food Crime Unit as part of the FSA. And I'm going to talk briefly about some of the sampling that we do every year, and how that can inform and how that links into the work of our local authorities with the overarching objective, as my colleagues have already spelled out, around ensuring that food is safe and what it says it is. So I'm going to talk to you about Operation Opson. Opson is a Europol and Interpol joint annual operation that we participate in as the FSA each year. So each year we allocate a budget to this, and we work very closely with our local authority partners to identify intelligence-led targets of food which is considered to pose a particular threat for authenticity. So this is predominantly looking at offences under the Fraud Act, of food that is not what it says it is. So this could be things like food that's adulterated, it could be food that's been substituted, or other forms of misrepresentation, just as an example. Once we've identified a set of targets, intelligence-led, we'll approach local authorities to effectively invite them to participate. And what that will look like is identifying the targets to local authorities, and then the local authorities would go out into their relevant areas. They would purchase the targets for us, and then they would send them off to the public analyst labs for official sampling. As a general example, for authenticity sampling under Operation Opson, that would be in excess of 200 samples taken each year, and that would be in conjunction with colleagues in Northern Ireland, Wales and England. We also work with colleagues in Scotland, in Food Standards Scotland and the Scottish Food Crime Unit, who would also be working as UK participants in Operation Ops. The lab analysis, as I've said, would be conducted by public analysts, and at the moment that would contribute into the bigger picture, which is an international picture where over 20 countries are taking part and taking samples for this operation. We would then look to the results of those samples, working on a strict schedule, which is usually over the end of the year and into the start of each calendar year. And those results would then be shared internationally and securely with the central Opson team in Europol. The purpose of that is number one, to identify fraudulent players, food that is circulating markets in any of those countries participating that is not what it says it is, and to identify opportunities working with local authorities and competent authorities to exercise their powers to either remove that food from the market. That could be things like recalls, it could be withdrawals, and also then for the launch of investigations to identify what had actually happened and how that food had been placed on the market. This also generates intelligence that can be shared on an international level, so forming part of an international picture on the food crime landscape, which informs other countries when you consider the complexity of international supply chains and high-risk supply chains in particular. And it also enables us to inform industry and partners here on food which is posing a particular threat. So that could be things like my colleagues have already mentioned around recalls and withdrawals, but it could also be things like issuing industry alerts. Industry alerts are those pieces of information that can be shared rapidly with industry, alerting them quickly to threats that are new and emerging, so that they can effectively focus their resources and their risk assessments to identify whether those products are on sale and how they could respond to those products. If we go on to the next slide now, please. This is another example of another international group that we form part of. This is the Global Alliance on Food Crime. So where Opson predominantly includes countries within Europe, although it does include countries outside of Europe and includes the USA. The Global Alliance on Food Crime is slightly different, but is also a combined partnership working internationally at shared threats in food fraud. And that is working together between the UK, USA, Canada, New Zealand and Australia. So in a very similar fashion to how Opson would work, where Opson would generate the results, they would collate those centrally, and a single Opson report would be issued, usually in the autumn time of each year, giving the global picture on food fraud threats and what results were captured and achieved within that period. So that could be looking at arrests, it could be looking at seizures, it could be looking at simply the number of countries taking part and the number of samples taken to increase the surveillance and the intelligence picture. Global Alliance on Food Crime would operate in a similar way, with a combined partnership and collaborative working on a particular given threat area. So this may be a specific target that's been identified centrally by the Global Alliance leads, where they then want to look at what the international picture on that threat may be. So it may be known in one country, but is this actually an international threat? And a way that we can do that is through sampling, gathering intelligence and sharing that intelligence centrally and internationally to give a wider picture that could then inform recommendations and actions in each individual country, essentially to mitigate and to reduce that threat. Again, the collective output for this and where those recommendations would be made would be essentially problem profiles. Problem profiles are documents that are pulled together predominantly in intelligence analysis, where essentially you outline a problem, you outline the threats and the risks, and recommendations are then made as to how they can be mitigated. So these can be extremely helpful in understanding the food crime threats that are currently present and how we can act upon them. In both of these examples as well, so any sampling undertaken by the National Food Crime Unit is collaborative. We work extremely closely with all of my colleagues on this call today to share the results all centrally, and much in the same way as my colleagues have mentioned that their results and their own sampling programmes can inform the prioritisation and the threat assessments conducted by the National Food Crime Unit. Equally, our results would then feed into others' work, which may inform the risk assessment around products entering the country as imports, or it could also inform decisions made by colleagues in the LAICT team around products that may be encountered by local authority teams where additional vigilance should be applied. I will hand over now. I'm not sure who's next in the line. To my colleague, Amy Walker, who's going to talk about sampling in Wales. Over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Jen. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Amy Walker, Senior Sampling and Surveillance Manager in the FSA in Wales Consumer Protection Team. And today I'm going to speak about the different sampling activities that we are involved in Wales. This presentation won't cover everything, but it will give you a good idea of some of the work that we're involved in. So within the FSA in Wales, the Consumer Protection Team leads on sampling activity where there are implications in Wales. Part of this includes coordinating participation in national sampling programmes that have coverage in Wales and are delivered using central funding. An example of this would be the Retail Surveillance Survey, which has been covered by my colleague Sophie earlier in the presentation. In Wales, as Jen had mentioned in her presentation, we also have involvement in Opson sampling. So this is organised centrally by the National Food Crime Unit. But in Wales, we have our own budget to allow Welsh local authorities to participate in Opson sampling. So I'll go into those a little bit more later on in the presentation. This has been a theme throughout, but just to say it again, my team worked very closely with my colleagues on this call today. We have regular meetings to discuss sampling prioritisation, any ongoing sampling projects, including status and any results of note that we may need to know about more. So in this presentation, I'm going to go over 3 different areas. We have the LA funded sampling programme in Wales, which is coordinated and funded in my team. The Retail Surveillance Survey, which I've mentioned is coordinated and funded centrally by the Laboratories and Sampling team, so Isobel and Sophie on this call. And finally, Operation Opson, which is coordinated by the NFCU, but we provide our own funding in Wales to participate. So first, I'm going to go over the local authority funded sampling programme that we run in Wales. This falls into the official control sampling category that Isobel discussed earlier in the presentation. The FSA in Wales allocates a small budget each year to supplement Welsh local authorities' existing sampling regimes. My team will agree sampling funding with the local authorities. The local authorities then carry out the sampling work in line with an agreed timeframe and send the samples to the Public Analyst Laboratory. The local authority and Public Analyst will work together to determine appropriate analysis for the samples being taken. The funding provided by the FSA in Wales aims to increase consumer protection through additional coordinated risk-based sampling activity. So to ensure local authorities have sufficient time and to try and minimise any burden on local authorities and laboratories at the end of the financial year, we aim to have this sampling funding agreed as early as possible, and it's something that we are continually working to improve upon. So I'm just going to go into a little bit of what the process looks like. When our budgets have been confirmed, local authorities are invited to bid for funding by submitting an application form to the Consumer Protection Team in Wales. The applications will include details of the proposed sampling, any rationale for the sampling and any anticipated outcomes, the types of businesses that may be targeted, anticipated timeframes, and the costings associated. The rationale and justification is based on local and regional intelligence. Again, this has been discussed previously throughout the presentation. There are various tools and data sources that local authorities can use as intelligence to inform sampling projects. Local authorities can use their own local intelligence of known risk in their area. An example of a source of intelligence supplied to local authorities from the FSA would be sampling data from other sampling projects, such as results from the previous retail surveillance survey. And another example is the National Food Standards priorities that Alice spoke about earlier. When these applications are received, they're assessed by my team primarily, and further to this, they are shared with colleagues across the agency, namely those involved in this call and more. And this is to ensure that sampling programmes are coordinated and aligned to minimise any risk of duplication and ensuring we're getting value for money. If applications are successful, funding allocation letters are prepared and sent to local authorities to confirm funding determinations, thus allowing sampling to commence. The communications are sent bilingually in Welsh and English, and this is something that's factored into our processing times. We have a fantastic Welsh language translation team who we work really closely with for our communications. Results and outcomes of FSA and Wales funded sampling are shared in various forums. Some of these are cross-government, some are within the FSA, and this is part of ongoing efforts to coordinate sampling activity and intelligence sharing. So results from sampling programmes have contributed to a lot of different things, namely the creation of business guidance, unsafe products being removed from sale, further targeted sampling being undertaken via the Local Authority Intelligence Coordination Team, as mentioned by Alice earlier, and this is to further investigate any non-compliance if it's deemed appropriate, prosecutions, and ultimately ensuring that food is safe and food is what it says it is. Could I have the next slide, please, Isobel? Thank you. So now that I've covered the local authority funded programme in Wales, I'm just going to go through our involvement of the national programmes that have coverage in Wales and are coordinated by our team. This list is not exhaustive. We are involved in other sampling projects from time to time, such as the imported food sampling programme. We'll be involved in these if there are any samples taken that have any Welsh implication. So the retail surveillance survey is coordinated centrally by the laboratories and sampling team. Sophie has already given a fantastic account of how the retail surveillance survey is coordinated and run, so I'm just going to highlight how my team in Wales are involved. The project covers 3 nations. In Northern Ireland, they work similarly to us in Wales. As part of the survey, a number of samples are purchased in Wales. In 24-25, 124 samples were purchased in Wales, which is around 15% of the total numbers purchased. As explained earlier by Sophie, during the survey, unsatisfactory results are shared with the relevant local authority for appropriate follow-up action if necessary. Where there is multiple authorities involved, so if the product's purchased in one country and manufactured in another, the information is sent to all parties with references to contact details to ensure there's a joint up approach and to facilitate easier communication between each party involved. We work closely with all teams to ensure that this process is followed. When the survey has ended, all Welsh samples, compliant and non-compliant, are communicated to Welsh local authorities in a timely manner to provide intelligence and to help inform future sampling programmes in Wales. This links back to my earlier point of providing local authorities with sampling results for intelligence purposes. Due to this, it's critical that we provide these results in a timely manner, and it is something that we aim to continually improve upon to ensure that data is relevant and it can be utilised effectively. Next, I'm going to just touch on Opson as well. Jen has already done a fantastic job covering the operation as a whole, and I'm just going to focus on our involvement in Wales. So the Consumer Protection Team supports Welsh local authority participation in Operation Opson by allocating a small budget to local authorities. In the past, this has involved sampling and or traceability checks. Local authorities are invited to express interest in taking part in Opson when the information on the targets have been shared. In Wales, we ask for LAs to return applications so that we can look through and allocate our budgets accordingly. Results from Opson sampling in Wales are combined with England and Northern Ireland and submitted as one return. And Jen has already gone through the outcomes of Opson sampling, so the results received in Wales, they will factor into that as well. And that's all from me. Thanks very much for listening. I believe I'm passing back to Isobel to summarise our presentation.
You are indeed. Thanks ever so much, Amy. I really hope that you've all enjoyed those presentations that my colleagues and I've put together. It's been lovely to have the opportunity to share some of the sampling that the FSA carries out. And whilst we've only covered a small proportion really of what sampling is undertaken by the FSA, hopefully this seminar has endeavoured to at least give you a flavour of the wide range of sampling undertaken and the different purposes for which that is done. Hopefully we've also flagged to you the one of the key themes throughout this presentation is that coordination between this group is really key in terms of the success of these sampling programmes. Now we have saved some time at the end of this session for questions, and I believe our Food for Thought colleagues have been carefully monitoring the Q&A box, so I will hand back to Rachel.
Thank you very much, Isobel, and thank you for an excellent presentation. That was really, really interesting insight into food sampling across the FSA, how you all work individually and then together, and great to hear about some particular success stories. So yeah, we've also got some useful links to some of the publications that were mentioned, which we'll post and pin at the top of the Q&A for our audience. And we've now got a little bit of time to cover some of the questions in the Q&A. So if anyone else has any questions they'd like to ask, then please continue to add them to the Q&A box, and I'll invite all of our speakers to come back on to the camera. And the first question we've got is, sampling is an important area of work, but unfortunately we are struggling now with resources in our local authority to carry this out, and the location points and timing of sample collection limits the ability to carry out sampling. How can the FSA help LAs with carrying out robust sampling and help with resources?
Alice, I think you were going to take that one. Sorry,
yeah.
I should have probably pointed to you.
No problem at all. I will come in there. Thank you very much for the question. I am aware that resources are constrained at local authority level. It is something that we in the Regulatory Compliance Division of the FSA are very cognizant of, and we do still have running the LA Resourcing Project. That project is focusing largely on the framework, the pipeline into the profession to support with local authority resourcing in that manner. However, the team has also started exploring potential cost recovery measures, which may also support local authority financial resources in that space. But as I think was promoted at the recent local authority engagement events, that is still very early in its development. I am also aware within the labs and sampling team in the FSA, they are working with PAs to ensure that there is the capacity and capability within the official control laboratories to support with sampling. And certainly if you're having any concerns in relation to service that you're receiving from your labs, such as difficulties submitting your samples, do please contact the FSA. You can get the details through the Food for Thought email of who to reach out to, and we can see if we can liaise with the labs and help facilitate easing that burden.
Thank you, Alice. Jan, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add on the back of what Alice has already covered that also we play a role in that together. So working holistically and working more closely together within the FSA. So understanding what our sampling asks are and when we make them. That's something that we're continuously tweaking and finessing to be better at that. To reduce how many asks we're making of local authorities, be that the samples that they're taking, whether that's funded samples, whether that's programmes like Opson. So it's looking at what our targets are. So, for example, if one programme has had to choose a finite number of targets and they're working with LAs to address those and to look at those and to go out and sample, but maybe there were other things in the basket that we had an interest in and that intelligence was pointing at, it's then looking at what other programmes we have. So that could be things like using Operation Opson to say, well, we had this target that we had an interest for retail surveillance sampling. It didn't make the cut for that one, but perhaps if we do consider that to be a threat, could that be absorbed and looked at through Operation Opson? And can we work more closely in that way? Also trying harder and being more dedicated to getting information out to our, our critically important local authority partners. How many times have we mentioned local authorities within the talk on sampling so far? They play a critical role, and we have to make sure that our ask can actually be delivered and can land well with local authorities. So giving people plenty of time and heads up, pre-warning and sticking to standard schedules with these programmes is what we're trying to do, to give local authorities enough for planning to know when these sampling programmes will be happening so that we can get as many people involved as we can.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jen. Okay, so the next question I can see was why, I think this came through when the retail surveillance sampling survey was being discussed, why focus on small businesses even though they may have more non-compliant samples when larger businesses would affect many more customers when things go wrong?
Sure, that's fine. I'm happy to take that one. Thanks, Rachel. So there's a couple of things here. So we know from our discussions with food industry that they're obviously larger. The big food businesses, so your big food retailers, and they're more likely therefore to have resources in place for their own quality and safety control systems, and this may include their own sampling. So this is one of the factors that we take into consideration when deciding where to undertake and target our sampling. So whilst we still do sample from large retailers, we do therefore focus a bit more resource on sampling for the smaller retailers who are less likely to have the resource in place in-house to do as much quality and safety control.
Great, thank you. And then another question about the retail surveillance survey was, can the survey include pet food and or pet food supplements?
It can do, is the short answer. As we spoke about, we have an annual prioritisation process where we look at all the ideas that have been generated from a wide range of areas and wide range of stakeholders. If there was a suggestion that came up covering one of those fields, we would certainly look at that and consider it for sampling.
Brilliant, thank you. So the next question was, what proportion of sampling work involves looking at the marketing of products, including their online claims off-pack, in online marketplaces and social media such as TikTok and Instagram?
I think I will come in there, Rachel. Thank you very much for the question. I can't specify a proportion of the sampling that looks at online claims as such. What I can say is that some of the samples procured within the directed sampling programme have been procured online. Some of the samples procured in Opson have been procured online. Those projects, whilst working with local authorities, do not necessarily specify where exactly to purchase them. And I am aware that the Retail Surveillance Survey this year is expanding to try and target more online purchases, because we are aware that that is a growing marketplace for food and food supplements, food and feed products. In relation to claims, the off-packaging advertising on websites, on online marketplaces, the local authority intelligence coordination team are also linked into a cross-government working group looking at online marketplaces, which is very much alive and aware of the complexities of regulating in that space, not only in relation to food law, but in relation to many other areas of consumer regulation. So we're looking at it in that avenue, and we are also looking to strengthen our relationships with the Advertising Standards Agency to see if there's anything that we can leverage in that space to support regulation within the online area.
That's brilliant, thank you. So we are actually coming up to the end of the event now. We've had quite a lot of questions submitted. I'll just ask one more that we've just had through. I have heard a lot about sampling from England, Northern Ireland and Wales, but much wasn't said regarding Scotland. Can you tell us anything about the sampling at FSS? Are you in contact with colleagues there?
I can indeed. I can see Jen's put her hand up as well, so she might want to come in here too. But we do have really close links with Food Standards Scotland. We talk regularly and they attend our cross-government meetings. They do run their own sampling programmes, which obviously they would be able to speak to you about. But we are in regular contact. We do discuss our plans and ensure that we are joined up across the FSA and Food Standards Scotland. So yes, we're very much joined up, although they haven't been specifically mentioned in this seminar.
Thank you.
Jen, do you want to come in and add?
It was largely going to cover the same thing. So as I'd mentioned in my piece around Operation Opson, so we work closely with Scotland on Operation Opson. They would go out, they would coordinate their own targets, and Scotland do have their own set of from a food crime point of view, they have the Scottish food crime unit. They would have their own set of priorities and their own intelligence-led prioritizations. And on some years, these may be the same, so we might be looking at the same targets. On other years, they may be different. But we do prepare when we send our results back to for Operation Opson. We would send a result back for the UK. So this would be based of 2 submissions, ours which would cover Northern Ireland, Wales and England, and then Scotland would make their own submission, but they are taken holistically as the UK submission. So we do work closely, but as Isobel said, they have their own set of priorities and they would work to those, and they would do that in their own way. But we work very closely with sharing the results, understanding how the threats may differ between here and in Scotland, and then kind of sharing how those threats may be changing over time with observations made through sampling.
Thank you. That's really interesting to know. So apologies again, everyone. We are coming to the end of the event, so we don't have quite enough time to cover all questions covered. It's certainly been a very popular topic, but we hope that's been useful for you all, and we're happy to take any unanswered questions offline if you'd like to get in touch at foodforthought@food.gov.uk. So thanks again to everybody for joining us in the audience today, and a huge thank you to our speakers for a fascinating seminar. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. A recording of the seminar will be available via our YouTube channel shortly, where you can also catch up on recordings of some of our previous events. And before we close, if you're not already on the Food for Thought mailing list and you'd like to join, you can sign up via the link, which is being pinned to the top of the Q&A. And as mentioned, we always welcome feedback on our seminars and ideas for future speakers and topics to cover. We'd love to hear from you if you work at the FSA as well and you'd like to get involved in volunteering for the Food for Thought team. So you can share your feedback and express interest in volunteering by completing the form, which is in the link that's been shared now. That just leaves me to say a very big thank you again to you all for joining us today. Thank you again to our speakers, and we hope to see you at our next seminar, which is on the 25th of September, where we'll be hearing all about the HalfSafe programme. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.